My name is Emily Carter. I'm 31 years old, and last Christmas changed everything I thought I knew about family. I can still feel the sting of that night in Newport, Rhode Island, the cold air biting at my cheeks as I carried armfuls of carefully wrapped gifts up the stone steps of my parents' historic mansion. The place looked like something out of a postcard. The wreath on the oak doors, golden lights spilling from the windows, carols floating faintly from inside. For a moment, I let myself believe I was walking into warmth, laughter, and love. But the second I reached the door, the fantasy shattered. My mother opened it with a stare so cold I thought the winter wind had followed me in. "You're not welcome this year," she said, her voice flat, almost rehearsed. I froze. My heart skipped, the smile on my lips crumbling as confusion swelled in my chest. "What?" was all I managed to whisper, shifting the stack of gifts in my arms like they could shield me from her words. That's when Rachel appeared, my older sister, her presence as sharp as broken glass. She stepped into the doorway, a crystal wine glass dangling from her hand, her lipstick perfect, her smirk cruel. "This is no place for losers," she said. The words cut deeper than she knew, or maybe exactly as deep as she intended. Everything in me cracked at once. The decorations I'd hung in my apartment, the hope I'd carried in every box of gifts, the image of Dad's smile as we sat down for dinner, they all vanished with that one sentence. Behind her, I could see the flicker of cousins by the fireplace, the shimmer of the chandelier over the dining table, plates piled with food untouched, a room full of family, and not one seat left for me. I turned toward my mother, silently begging for some sign of resistance, for her to shake her head and tell Rachel to stop. But she only tightened her lips and looked down at her napkin, as if silence could absolve her. My father sat at the table, shifting uncomfortably, eyes locked on the tablecloth, unwilling to meet my gaze. Their silence burned worse than Rachel's insult. I forced a smile so brittle it felt like glass about to shatter. "Okay," I said softly, steadying my voice even as humiliation clawed at my chest. "I understand." I stepped back into the freezing night, the gifts still heavy in my arms, the warmth of the house replaced by the hollow ache of betrayal. My heels clicked on the cobblestones as I made my way to my car, each step sharper, louder, angrier than the last. I sat behind the wheel, hands trembling as I set the gifts on the passenger seat, their bows mocking me in the dim glow of the street lamp. For years, I'd poured myself into helping Rachel, $50,000 for her boutique, nights spent balancing her books, weekends skipped so I could work overtime and cover her endless emergencies. I'd told myself it was family, that one day she'd see me not as her shadow, but as her equal. And yet here I was, cast out like I never mattered, labeled a loser by the very people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. The humiliation burned, but beneath it, something colder, sharper began to rise. My phone sat in the cup holder, buzzing faintly with holiday notifications, and I picked it up with a steadiness that surprised even me. When my financial advisor answered, I didn't hesitate. My voice was calm, firmer than I felt. "Cancel everything right now," I said. "Every cent tied to Rachel's boutique. Pull it back." There was a pause on the line, then a quiet, "Understood." I hung up, staring through the windshield at the mansion glowing with light and laughter. 30 minutes from now, that glow would flicker. Rachel's smile would falter. The life she thought was secured by my silent sacrifices would begin to unravel. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what came next. I turned the key in the ignition, the engine humming beneath my hands, and whispered to myself, "Merry Christmas, Rachel." The polished oak doors of the Carter mansion swung open again, but this time I didn't wait to be invited. My heels clicked sharply against the polished wood floors as I strode inside, my pulse hammering but my head held high. I wasn't there to beg for a place at their table. I was there to make sure they remembered who they were dismissing. Rachel stood by the fireplace, her glass of wine catching the glow of the chandelier as if she were posing for a magazine cover. Cousins whispered nearby, their eyes darting between us like spectators waiting for the first blow in a fight. My parents stayed at the long dining table, their plates still untouched, their silence as thick as the scent of rosemary and roasted turkey lingering in the air. "Why wasn't I invited?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended, but steady. "After everything I've done for this family."
After $50,000 to keep your boutique alive?
Rachel turned, her smirk widening as she set her glass down with exaggerated grace.
Helping?
She scoffed. "Emily, let's be honest, those little scraps barely kept the lights on. If you really cared, you would have done more." Her words hit like a slap. Scraps. I thought of the nights I'd skipped vacations, worked overtime at the Boston firm where I pored over ledgers until my eyes blurred, all to funnel money into her so-called dream. $50,000 wasn't scraps. It was my savings, my time, my sacrifice. I glanced toward my parents, desperate for them to intervene. My mother's lips pressed into a tighter line, her eyes fixed on her napkin. My father shifted uncomfortably in his chair, throat clearing like he wanted to speak but couldn't. Their silence was deafening. "You think I'm some ATM for your failing business?" My voice trembled with rage I could barely contain. "I gave you everything I could."
"And you dare to stand here and call it scraps?"
Rachel leaned against the fireplace, her posture dripping with arrogance. "You're jealous," she said smoothly. "Jealous because I'm building something real while you're stuck crunching numbers in some office. Let's face it, Emily, you'll never be more than average." The air in the room thickened, pressing down on me until I felt like I couldn't breathe. I thought of the years I'd stayed quiet, swallowing her taunts for the sake of family peace. But this was different. This was public, brutal, meant to humiliate. My hand reached for my phone, fingers steady despite the storm inside. I locked eyes with Rachel, her smug smile daring me to back down. "You know what?" I said softly but firmly. "I'm done." I pressed the call button, my advisor's voice answering on the other end. "Hey, it's Emily Carter," I said, every word deliberate. "That $50,000 investment tied to Rachel Carter's boutique. Cancel everything right now. Pull every cent." Rachel's smirk faltered, her face draining of color. "What are you doing?" she snapped, stepping toward me. "You heard me," I said, holding the phone steady. "I'm not funding this anymore." Her panic was instant. "You can't do that! You'll ruin me!" Her voice cracked, desperation replacing arrogance in a blink. I ended the call, tucking the phone back into my clutch with a calmness I didn't feel. "You did that yourself," I said flatly. The room went silent. My cousins stared, mouths slightly open, unsure if they should laugh or pity. My mother's hands twisted in her lap, her gaze fixed anywhere but on me. My father's jaw clenched, but he stayed rooted in his chair. Their silence confirmed everything I needed to know. I turned on my heel, the hem of my coat brushing the polished floors as I walked toward the door. Rachel's voice followed me, shrill and unsteady. "You'll regret this, Emily. Don't think you can just walk away." But I didn't look back. Outside, the freezing Rhode Island air hit me again, sharper now, but it didn't sting the same way. This time, it cleared my head, numbing the ache enough to let resolve take root. I gripped the steering wheel of my car, staring at the mansion glowing behind me, and whispered to myself, "No more." I wasn't their bank. I wasn't their scapegoat. I wasn't their loser. This was the night I drew the line. The drive back to my apartment in Providence should have been peaceful. Christmas lights blinked from porches, wreaths hung proudly on front doors, and children bundled in scarves darted across snowy yards. Yet all I felt was hollow, like the night had punched a hole clean through me. I thought about Rachel's face, smug, then panicked, as I canceled the investment. For years, I had shielded her boutique from collapse, writing check after check, convincing myself I was helping her employees, not her ego. $50,000 wasn't scraps. It was my freedom, poured into her bottomless pit. I pulled into my driveway, the small house glowing warmly with the decorations I'd put up alone. But instead of comfort, my chest felt tight. My parents had said nothing, not a single word to defend me, not when Rachel mocked me, not when I stood there alone. Their silence was worse than Rachel's cruelty. It was consent. My phone buzzed as I set down my keys. A notification from Facebook. Against my better judgment, I opened it. Rachel's post was already spreading like wildfire. Some people pretend to be family but can't lift a finger when it really counts. Pathetic. Guess not everyone is cut out to be part of something bigger than themselves. She tagged me. My name bolded for every mutual friend, every cousin, every neighbor to see. Within minutes, comments stacked up. Wow, Emily. That's cold. Not surprised. She's always been jealous of Rachel. What kind of sister abandons family like that? Each word was a dagger. People who had no idea of the years I'd sacrificed now painting me as selfish, bitter, a failure. I scrolled, my chest tightening with every cruel remark. One cousin even added, "No wonder she's still single. Too selfish to love anyone but herself." I locked my phone, my hands shaking. How dare she? I had poured myself dry for Rachel, covering rent for her boutique, paying suppliers when she couldn't, even loaning money for her flashy marketing stunts. I had skipped vacations, worked late into the night at my accounting job in Boston, and still she called me scraps. And now, she was dragging me through the mud online for the world to see. The betrayal felt bigger than the mansion. At least there, the cruelty was private. Here, it was public, permanent, carved into digital stone for everyone to share, mock, and gossip about. I dropped my head into my hands, whispering to myself, "Don't cry, not for her, not for them." But the tears came anyway. The phone buzzed again. Another notification, another insult, another reminder that Rachel's power wasn't just her sharp tongue. It was her ability to turn people against me, even with lies. Then, the phone rang. Her name lit up the screen. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, letting her stew in the storm she'd unleashed. But curiosity, or maybe some final sliver of hope, made me swipe to answer. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice flat. "Emily, you have to fix this." Her voice was frantic, nothing like the smug tone at the mansion. "The supplier just emailed me. They're pulling out of the spring collection. Millions are gone if this deal collapses. You can't let this happen. Call your advisor back. Reinstate the funds, please." The desperation in her voice would have broken me once, but now it only fueled the fire. "You mean the money you spent on Paris trips and handbags?" I snapped. "The money that bought your Instagram perfect life while I worked myself to exhaustion? No, Rachel. I'm done." "I didn't mean it," she cried. "That post. I'll delete it. Just fix this. I need you. Please, Emily, I can't survive without you." Her words echoed, pathetic and hollow. Not remorse, not apology, just fear. "No," I said, my tone final, each syllable a blade. "You made your choice. You don't get to rewrite it now." And I hung up. The silence that followed was deafening, but for the first time in years, it wasn't suffocating. It was liberating. Rachel had gone too far. She'd crossed the line from family tension into public betrayal. And in that moment, as my phone buzzed with more comments I didn't care to read, I knew something had shifted. I wasn't going to save her anymore. This wasn't just about $50,000. It was about my dignity. And I wasn't going to let her drag me to the floor ever again. A week passed after the Christmas disaster, and the storm Rachel unleashed online still echoed in whispers around Providence. At work, I caught colleagues side-eyeing me, clearly having read her post. At the grocery store, a family friend, Mrs. Klein, asked me in a hushed voice, "Are you and Rachel okay?" I forced a smile, but inside, I was raw. Betrayal clung to me like a second skin. Then, one gray Saturday morning, my phone lit up with a text from an unfamiliar number. "Emily, it's Mark. Can we talk? It's about Rachel." Mark Walsh, my brother-in-law. I hesitated, staring at the screen. Rachel's husband had always stood by her, smirking at her jabs, echoing her arrogance. Why would he reach out now? My instinct screamed not to trust him, but curiosity gnawed at me. "About what?" I typed back. His reply was fast. "Meet me at the diner on Hope Street. Noon." It's important. The message carried a weight I couldn't ignore. So that afternoon, I slipped into a small corner booth at the Hope Street Diner. The place smelled of fried eggs and black coffee, the clatter of dishes and hum of conversation filling the air. Mark was already there, looking nothing like the polished man who usually hovered at Rachel's side. His tie was loose, his hair slightly disheveled, and his eyes carried exhaustion. "Thanks for coming," he said quietly as I slid into the booth. "I'm not here for games," I replied, folding my arms. "What do you want, Mark?" He took a shaky breath and pulled out his phone. "You need to know what Rachel's really been doing with your money." He turned the screen toward me. My stomach dropped as I scanned the statement. Saks Fifth Avenue, Louis Vuitton, a $10,000 deposit for a Paris hotel, thousands spent at restaurants in New York, not a single transaction for fabric suppliers or payroll. This isn't her boutique," I whispered, my voice hollow. Mark shook his head, his jaw tight. "No, that 50 grand? It wasn't for the business. She's been using your money to fund her lifestyle. The bags, the trips, the galas she posts online, it's all you, and I can't cover for her anymore." The words hit like ice water. Every time she'd looked me in the eye and called my support scraps, she'd been laughing at me, using me, playing me. "Why are you telling me this now?" I demanded, anger bubbling beneath my shock. His shoulders slumped. "Because I'm done. She's out of control. And it's not just about her. It's about the kids. They don't deserve this chaos. I've been complicit, but I can't do it anymore. You deserve to know the truth." I sat back, my pulse hammering. The pieces clicked together. The glitzy Instagram posts, the smug laughter at the mansion, the arrogance. Rachel's success wasn't hers. It was mine. Bought with my sacrifices while she paraded in designer gowns. "She humiliated me in front of everyone," I said, my voice low, shaking with rage. "And all along, she was spending my money on her vanity?" Mark nodded, his eyes heavy. "I'm sorry. I should have spoken up sooner. I thought she'd change, but she won't. She'll burn everything down if someone doesn't stop her." I clenched my fists under the table. My heart was pounding, but instead of despair, I felt something else. Clarity. For years, I had convinced myself that helping Rachel was about family, about loyalty. But family didn't lie, didn't humiliate, didn't bleed you dry for their own ego. I leaned forward, my voice calm but steely. "I'm going to make sure she doesn't get another dime from me. Not ever." Mark studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Good, because she's already circling the drain, Emily. And if she takes you down with her, she won't even blink." I left the diner with a folder of screenshots Mark had shared, my hands trembling as I clutched the evidence. The cold Providence air bit my cheeks, but inside, a fire burned. Rachel hadn't just betrayed me. She had built her empire of arrogance on my back. And for the first time in years, I wasn't going to let her. I wasn't her bank. I wasn't her scapegoat. And soon, the world was going to see who she really was. 2 nights after meeting Mark at the diner, I sat at my kitchen table in Providence with the folder of screenshots spread out before me. Each line item was like a knife. $3,000 for handbags, $5,000 for a Caribbean cruise, $10,000 for Paris hotels. My sacrifices had funded Rachel's vanity, not her so-called boutique. The kettle whistled softly, and I poured myself tea, trying to steady my thoughts. That's when the doorbell rang, sharp, insistent. I opened the door to find my parents standing there on my porch, their faces etched with purpose. My mother's lips were pressed into a tight line, her eyes darting past me into the house. My father shifted uncomfortably, his hands buried in the pockets of his old wool coat. "Emily, we need to talk," my dad said, his voice low. I hesitated, then stepped aside. They entered stiffly, sitting on the couch I'd bought with my own money. No handouts, no strings. My mother was the first to speak, her tone clipped. "It's about Rachel." I crossed my arms, already bracing myself. "Of course it is." "She's in trouble," Mom continued, ignoring my bite. "The boutique is falling apart because you pulled your funding. You need to help her." Her words landed like a slap. I stared at her, disbelief hardening into anger. "Help her?" I said sharply. "After she lied to me, spent my money on designer bags and vacations, and humiliated me in front of the entire family. You want me to bail her out again?" Dad raised his hands as though to calm a fire. "She made mistakes, yes, but she's your sister. Family sticks together. You can't just abandon her." Family. That word, so heavy in their mouths, suddenly felt like chains. "You didn't say a word when she called me a loser in front of everyone at Christmas," I shot back, my voice trembling but rising. "You didn't defend me when she trashed me online. You let her tear me down, and now you're here asking me to save her?" Mom's face hardened, her voice sharp with accusation. "You're being selfish, Emily. Your sister is drowning, and you're sitting here with your cozy little job and your perfect life." Perfect life. I almost laughed. My life was modest, steady. I worked long hours as an accountant, skipped vacations, and pinched pennies so I could fund Rachel's so-called dream. Selfish. "I gave her $50,000, I said, my voice cutting through the air. "She didn't spend it on her boutique. She spent it on herself. I've got proof, and I'm done being her bank." Dad sighed, rubbing his temples. His voice softened, almost pleading. "Just give her another chance, Emily. Reinstate the funds. Just enough to get her back on her feet. She'll turn things around." I shook my head, my resolve firm. "No. You always take her side, even when she's wrong. Why is it always me who has to fix her messes?" The silence hung heavy, broken only by the hum of my refrigerator. My parents looked at me like they didn't recognize who I'd become. And then the knock came, a soft but steady rap on the door. I opened it to find Gail Reed, my closest friend, standing there. She must have seen my car in the driveway and guessed what was happening. "What's going on?" she asked, stepping inside. Before I could answer, Mom spoke with icy disdain. "This is a family matter. You wouldn't understand." But Gail didn't flinch. She looked my parents straight in the eyes and said, "I understand loyalty, and Emily's been loyal enough. She's given everything she has while Rachel lied, used her, and humiliated her. Why are you blaming the victim instead of the one who betrayed her?" My mother bristled, her cheeks flushing. "You don't understand family." "No," Gail said firmly. "I understand boundaries, and Emily deserves better than this constant cycle of being used." Her words settled over the room like a hammer striking glass. I turned to my parents, my voice clear and steady. "I'm done. Not just with Rachel, but with all of this. If you can't respect that, then you've chosen her over me." Dad's mouth opened like he wanted to protest, but Mom grabbed his arm. They stood, their expressions tight with frustration and disbelief. Without another word, they walked out. The door closed behind them, and I felt something shift inside me. Relief. Like a weight I'd been carrying for years had finally fallen away. Gail placed a hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing," she said softly. I nodded, the reality of it sinking in. For the first time, I had drawn the line, and I wasn't stepping back. If this story touches you, drop a number 1 in the comments. Every one reminds us that these stories matter, and it gives us the motivation to keep sharing them with you. January rolled in with bitter winds sweeping through Providence, but inside my small home, The air felt lighter. For the first time in years, I wasn't tethered to Rachel's demands. I worked my hours at the firm, shared quiet dinners with Gail, and even started painting again, a hobby I'd abandoned when Rachel's crises consumed my time. But the silence didn't last. News of Rachel's unraveling spread quickly. A mutual friend sent me a link to a local business article. Walsh Boutique faces sudden closures after supplier withdrawals. The headline alone told the story. Without my funding, her boutique couldn't pay suppliers, and they were pulling contracts one by one. That same day, I ran into Margaret, our old neighbor, at the grocery store. She leaned close, whispering like she was sharing a secret. "I heard Rachel's store is shutting down. Is it true?" I forced a polite smile, but inside, the mix of vindication and sadness churned. Rachel's empire, built on lies and my sacrifices, was finally cracking. 2 nights later, my phone buzzed with a text from Mark. "I'm leaving her, taking the kids to my mother's house in Providence. Can we meet?" We arranged to meet at a small cafe near Wayland Square. Mark looked worn down, his eyes hollow, but his words were steady. "I can't stay with her anymore," he admitted, stirring his coffee without taking a sip. "The lies, the spending, the way she treats the kids, it's too much. I need to get them out." For the first time, I saw a different Mark. Not the smirking husband who stood by Rachel's arrogance, but a father desperate to protect his children. "What's your plan?" I asked cautiously. "I'm moving the kids into my mother's place for now. It's cramped, but safe. I'll find a rental nearby once I can." He hesitated, then looked at me with something like shame. "I hate to ask, but I could use help, just until I get steady." I studied him, the weight of the past years heavy in my chest. He had been silent when Rachel cut me down, complicit in her cruelty, but the kids, 2 boys and a girl, didn't deserve to grow up in chaos. "This isn't for her," I said firmly. "It's for the children. If I help, it's because they deserve stability." Relief flickered across his face. "I understand." That afternoon, I pulled out my laptop and scrolled through rental listings in Providence. Together, we found a modest 2-bedroom apartment not far from his mother's. Affordable, simple, but safe. I wired the first month's rent and deposit, sealing the deal. Mark's voice cracked as he whispered, "Thank you. You don't know what this means." "I do," I replied softly. "Because I was one of those kids once, caught between people who should have known better. They deserve better than this." Meanwhile, word about Rachel's downfall intensified. Former employees whispered about unpaid wages, suppliers blacklisted her boutique, and on social media, the very friends who once praised her posts now fell silent. At the firm, a colleague nudged me with his phone, showing Rachel's name trending locally with words like fraud and scandal attached. I kept my face neutral, but inside, a strange calm settled. For years, Rachel had painted me as small, invisible, even worthless. Now the truth was painting her. One evening, Gail stopped by with takeout. As we unpacked containers of chow mein, she looked at me knowingly. "How does it feel, watching her finally face consequences?" I thought for a moment, chopsticks pausing midair. "Honestly, empty. She built this collapse herself. I don't feel joy. I don't feel pity. I just feel done." Gail nodded, squeezing my hand. "That's growth, Emily. You're not carrying her weight anymore." For the first time in my life, I believed her. Rachel's empire was collapsing, but I wasn't going down with it. I was building something different, something real. By late February, Providence was still draped in winter's gray, but in my heart, something warmer had started to bloom: freedom. For weeks, I had lived without Rachel's constant demands gnawing at my peace. My days were filled with steady work at the firm, quiet evenings with Gail, and weekends painting by the window with a mug of tea. But just when I thought I was free, the phone rang. It was my mother. "Emily," she said, her tone strained. "We need to talk. Please come by the house. My stomach tightened. I knew exactly what this was about. Still, against my better judgment, I agreed. Part of me still longed for closure, some proof that my family could finally see me for who I was. When I stepped into my parents' house, the air was thick with unease. My father sat stiffly on the couch, hands clasped. My mother paced the room, her eyes darting between us. And then Rachel appeared from the kitchen, her once glossy hair limp, her face drawn and pale. She looked nothing like the sister who had strutted through life with smugness, but her eyes still carried that same sharp glint I knew too well. "Emily," she started, her voice trembling. "I made mistakes. I said terrible things. But I need you now. Please." Her words fell heavy in the air. For years, she had mocked me, used me, twisted my generosity into her advantage. And now she was reaching out, not out of love, but desperation. My father cleared his throat. "She's lost everything, Emily. The boutique is gone. She's barely holding on. Can't you help her one last time?" My mother's voice followed quickly, almost pleading. "You have a good job. You're steady. She's family. Blood is blood." I turned to them, my chest tight. Where was this loyalty when she humiliated me at Christmas? When she called me a loser in front of everyone? When she dragged my name through the mud online? Silence. Their eyes dropped to the floor, their guilt unspoken. Rachel stepped closer, tears streaking her cheeks. "I was jealous, okay? You lived a quiet life, but you had something I didn't. Dad's pride. Mom's faith. I tried to outshine you, but I only destroyed myself. Please, Emily. I need you." Her voice cracked, but even through the cracks, I could hear the old manipulation. I shook my head slowly. "You didn't just betray me, Rachel. You betrayed my trust, my sacrifices, and our family." My father reached out, his voice breaking. "Emily, please, for your mother, for me, can't we heal this family?" For a moment, the weight of their words pressed on me. I thought of Linda, our grandmother, who used to say, "Family isn't about who shares your blood, it's about who shares your burdens." I met Rachel's desperate gaze, steady and unflinching. "You taught me something, Rachel. Family isn't about being used, it's about respect. And you never gave me that." Her sobs grew louder, but I didn't flinch. My parents watched, helpless, as the wall I had built between myself and Rachel became unbreakable. I stood, my voice calm but resolute. "I'm done carrying you, done fixing your mistakes. I wish you well, Rachel, but you're on your own now." Rachel collapsed onto the couch, her cries muffled in her hands. My parents sat frozen, torn between loyalty and truth. But I didn't stay to watch. I walked out of that house into the cold Providence night, the snow crunching beneath my boots. For the first time in years, I felt light, free, whole. And as I looked up at the dark winter sky, I knew this chapter of my life was closing for good. The last time I walked out of my parents' house, snow clung to my boots as if Providence itself was reluctant to let me go. The night was silent, save for the crunch of my steps and the sharp rhythm of my breath. Behind me, Rachel's sobs echoed faintly through the walls of the home that had never truly felt like mine. But this time, I didn't turn back. For so long, I'd been trapped in the cycle of giving and forgiving, of sacrificing my peace to keep Rachel's illusions alive. But as the bitter wind brushed my cheeks, I realized something undeniable. I was finally free. The weeks that followed were quiet, almost unnervingly so. Providence in March was a canvas of gray skies and thawing snow, yet inside my small home, I felt warmth for the first time in years. Rachel didn't call. My parents didn't visit. The silence should have been unsettling, but instead, it wrapped around me like a blanket. For once, I wasn't waiting for the next demand, the next humiliation, the next betrayal. Instead, my days filled with steady routines. Mornings at the firm brought the familiar hum of keyboards, the rustle of paperwork, and the occasional laughter of colleagues who saw me not as a failure, but as a trusted professional. Evenings belonged to me. Sometimes I painted, abstract strokes of blues and reds that felt like releasing years of anger onto a canvas. Other nights, Gail would come over, and we'd sit by the fireplace with wine, dissecting everything from Rachel's downfall to the latest community gossip. "Do you regret it?" Gail asked one night, her eyes soft but probing. "Regret what?" I asked, swirling my glass. "Walking away, cutting her off, saying no." I thought about it for a long moment, the fire crackling between us. "No," I said finally. Because for once, I said yes to myself. But just because I had let go didn't mean Rachel stopped crashing. Providence is a small city, and word travels fast. By April, whispers reached me through coworkers, through neighbors, even through strangers at the market. Rachel had lost her boutique for good. The suppliers she once bragged about working with had blacklisted her. The employees she treated like disposable props had scattered. She had tried to pivot, launching an online shop, throwing clearance sales, even attempting a personal styling business. None of it lasted. People remembered her arrogance, her cruelty. Trust was gone. Her husband, Mark, had already moved on, renting the small apartment in Providence I'd helped secure. He'd filed for separation, and though he didn't say much, Gail told me she'd run into him at the grocery store with the kids. He seemed lighter, more at peace. Rachel, though, was a different story. Rumors swirled that she was living in a cramped apartment near downtown, pawning off her designer bags, surviving on scraps of her old life. Friends had vanished. The spotlight she craved had dimmed. One evening, curiosity got the better of me. Against my better judgment, I searched her name on Facebook. The once constant stream of glossy photos had vanished. In their place was silence. Her last post, a desperate plea about betrayal and family, was 3 months old, littered with comments from acquaintances who no longer took her seriously. I closed the app, my chest tight. I didn't feel joy in her fall, only a quiet confirmation of what I had always known. Arrogance built on lies will eventually collapse. James and Margaret, my parents, stayed mostly silent. They didn't call after that night. At first I wondered if they were ashamed, or if they still hoped I'd change my mind. But as weeks stretched into months, I understood the truth. They had chosen Rachel, even in her ruin. Their silence stung less than I expected. It wasn't new. For years they had chosen her, her drama, her needs, her arrogance, over my quiet strength. They had been complicit in every humiliation by saying nothing. One afternoon in May, Gail and I walked along the cliffs of Newport, the Atlantic waves crashing against the rocks below. She slipped her arm through mine. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded, gazing at the horizon. "I used to think family meant everything," I said softly. "But maybe family is just who shows up for you. And they never really did." Gail squeezed my arm. "You showed up for yourself. That's worth more." By summer, my life had transformed in ways I hadn't expected. At work, I earned a promotion, senior financial analyst, a recognition not of my title, but of years of quiet dedication. My boss congratulated me in front of the whole office, something Rachel had mocked me for never achieving. As I accepted the applause, I thought, this is mine. I earned this, and no one can take it away. In my free time, I started volunteering at a community center downtown. Twice a week, I taught financial literacy workshops for women rebuilding their lives after divorce, layoffs, or hardship. Teaching them how to budget, save, and invest wasn't just about numbers. It was about giving them the tools I had once used to survive Rachel's chaos. One woman, a mother of 2, hugged me after class. "You've given me hope," she whispered. I smiled, tears prickling my eyes. For years, I had funneled money into Rachel's boutique, hoping to keep others employed. to save her world. But now, my energy was going where it mattered, to people who valued it. It was late August when the past finally tried to claw its way back. I was at the community center, packing up after class, when my phone buzzed. The caller ID made my stomach drop. Rachel. For a long moment, I just stared at it, debating whether to answer. Against my better judgment, I pressed accept. Emily? Her voice was hoarse, almost unrecognizable. Yes. I need help, she stammered. I know I don't deserve it, but I have nothing. No job, no friends, not even Mark. I'm living in a one-bedroom with no heat. Please, Emily. Her words tumbled out, frantic, desperate. For the first time, I heard not arrogance, but raw fear. I closed my eyes, taking a steadying breath. For years, I had dreamed of hearing her beg, of watching her empire crumble, and now, the moment was here. But instead of triumph, I felt nothing. Rachel, I said slowly, you made your choices. You burned every bridge. I can't fix that for you. A sob broke through the line. So that's it? You're leaving me to rot? I thought of the years she had left me on the floor, metaphorically and literally, her cruel laughter, her smug posts, her betrayal. Yes, I said finally, my voice calm. I am. And with that, I hung up. That night, I sat on my porch, the summer air thick with cicadas. For the first time in my life, I felt no tether to Rachel, no guilt about saying no, no ache for the approval of parents who never truly saw me. I thought of Linda, my grandmother, her words echoing in my heart. Family isn't about blood. It's about who carries your burdens when the world is heavy. I smiled, thinking of Gail, of Mark and his kids, of the women at the community center. These were my people, my chosen family, the ones who saw me not as a failure, not as a loser, but as someone strong enough to stand tall. Rachel's downfall wasn't my victory. My victory was reclaiming my life. By December, almost a year after that fateful Christmas, Providence was once again glowing with holiday lights. But this time, I wasn't standing outside a mansion with gifts in hand and hope in my heart. I was hosting my own Christmas gathering in my small home. Gail was there, laughing as she burned a batch of cookies. Mark stopped by with his kids, their cheeks flushed from the cold, their eyes bright with excitement as they opened small gifts I'd wrapped for them. We ate, we laughed, we sang carols off-key, and as the night wound down, I stood at the window, watching snow fall softly over the street. My phone buzzed once, a message from my parents. Merry Christmas. I smiled faintly, setting the phone aside. I wasn't angry anymore. I just didn't need them. Because in that moment, surrounded by laughter and warmth, I realized the truth I had chased for years. Family isn't who tears you down. Family is who helps you rise. And I had finally found mine.